Welcome to everyone. We apologize for starting our session a little bit late. We are happy that everyone is here and can take their seats. Thank you. I wish to welcome all of you to the panel this morning. We are in our third day of the conference, and if you are like me at all, your mind and your heart is vibrating with so many questions and so much information and so much thought about the intersection between the Turkish model and the Arabic heritage and all of the complexities involved in this. And so I believe we have had a wonderful conference so far, and I trust that this panel this morning will be no different. Our panel this morning, the theme is fields of work and practical experiences on both local and global levels, particularly with the issue of dealing with division, fighting division, resisting division, and difference. So we have very distinguished colleagues on our panel this morning. We were scheduled to have Dr. Yasin Aktay from Turkey, professor of sociology. He was not able to make it with us, so in being very generous, my friend Dr. Faruk Tuncer will be presenting some of Dr. Yasin's work and also presenting some of his own work, which is very practical, working with the Journalists and Writers Foundation in Istanbul, which is a very key part of the Gulen movement and a center of the global and local activity of the movement. We also have Dr. Mohammed Sofar, whose paper is called The Concept of Dialogue, a Comparison Between Fethullah Gulen and Sayyid Qutb. And this is a very important work. I had the opportunity to read Dr. Mohammed's paper before coming, and it is a very intricate work of literary analysis and thought analysis that I think is important for us. And then finally we have Dr. Paginam, who will provide the commentation for the papers and a sort of analysis, although I know that she is like me, we have had limited exposure to the papers before now. So we will all give it our best. I wish to say a few things to begin our panel and to connect our topic for this panel to some themes that we have discussed yesterday and the day before that are very important. I am coming from the West, and I have been very eager to hear how this Gulen movement how people in the Arab world will respond to the Gulen movement, and to hear the perspectives in general on the West. And I heard yesterday and the day before several people express suspicion of the Gulen movement because of its success in the West. And I have been a first-hand eyewitness to many of the initiatives in the United States, the initiatives of the Gulen movement. Because of the book that I wrote about Mr. Gulen, I have had the deep honor and privilege of traveling around the United States, Canada, Europe, Turkey, different places, but particularly in the West, on behalf of the movement, and speaking at maybe 40 different cities around the United States and Canada, and some parts of Europe, at the different places where the Gulen movement is active. And I want to explain just a moment my perspective on why the movement has been so successful in the West. I think it is natural for you to be suspicious. I also think there are explanations for why it works, and it has to do with Mr. Gulen's understanding of the role and purpose of religion and the way religion achieves its goals. This is central to Mr. Gulen. According to Mr. Gulen, and you can see it in the, if you have the translation, you can see a little bit of an interview with him in this, where he speaks about this just for a moment. He says that religion, whether it is Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Hindu, whatever religion, that religion must address itself to the unchanging dimensions of human life, the things that are eternal across time and space and experience, that is really where religion resides, and that's what its focus is. And that, of course, each religion, Islam included, offers guidelines for how the state and the political structures could work, but that none of them, he says none of them, including Islam, offer a permanent, fixed political system that is to determine everything for all time and for all people. Instead, it offers guidelines based on the eternal, unchanging nature of human experience. And so this gives room for multiple kinds of social and political structures across the world, across time, across space, based on the different cultures and the different human situations that we find ourselves in over time. So what he says is that the goal of religion, including Islam, is to purify people of their sins, to encourage us as people to do the inner jihad, to work, to rid ourselves of hatred and bitterness and violence, and to create virtue in ourselves. And that this is the role of religion in society, to provide the context for this, to provide the motivation, to present the world of this. That this is what a world could be like if we as individuals rooted the hatred out of our hearts. That this is what true religion does. The methods of the state, armies, police, laws, court systems, are not effective in achieving that goal, according to Mr. Gulen. I would say even according to our experience. You know, the barrel of a gun can make us say something, can make us stop a certain behavior, but it cannot purify my intention. It cannot purify my heart. It can force me to conform in my external behavior to something that somebody thinks is good, but it cannot make me a good person. And so there's a fundamental difference between the goals and the methods of social, political, government structures on the one hand, and true religion on the other. And this is something that Mr. Gulen is very clear about. He does not teach or preach the so-called Western concept of separation of religion and state. However, his understanding of the role of religion is compatible with that notion, the way that it is practiced in certain parts of the West. The West is very complex. It is not one big monolithic thing. Much like Islam is very complex. It is not one big monolithic thing. The West is different. Some parts of Europe are very different than the United States. And the kinds of secularism, and I say that in plural, the kinds of secularisms. There's not just one kind of secularism. Our distinguished colleague yesterday and our sister yesterday was mentioning this, that in France, for example, and in Turkey for a certain part of its history, it was practicing laïcité, laïcism, a certain kind of secularism which begins philosophically with a suspicion of religion and therefore a hostility toward it. That is not the only kind of secularism that is present in the West. That is not the kind of secularism that is present in my country, in the United States. We do not practice that secularism. In fact, we find that problematic. Our sources philosophically for secularism come from British authors, John Locke, for example, 17th century. And he argues that the state and religion function in two different realms, two different kingdoms, and that the state has its goals to protect people from harm, to defend it when people attack, to negotiate transactions of property and other business and other type things, that's the role of the state. And the role of religion is to show us how to achieve salvation. And you must keep these realms separate so that each of them can do their job and can do their work perfectly and then inform each other. The religion, being what it is purely, can say to the state, you're going the wrong direction. You need to reform yourself. And then the state sometimes can say to the leaders of religion who maybe have let their own ego get in the way of true faith, maybe you need to come back to the true path. They are to inform each other within their distinct realms. This is a fundamentally different philosophical orientation toward religion than what you find in France and in some parts of history in Turkey. So I want to make that clear because the Gulen movement has been very successful in the United States and in some parts of Europe because of this. Because Mr. Gulen understands the role of religion is to purify us as individuals. And that the only way that that can happen is if individual people and groups of people actively live that faith, live that virtue. Those crazy people that one of our distinguished colleagues talked about yesterday, living that, doing the initiatives of civil society, bringing all people together into things that are obviously good. That is the truest testimony of faith and will convert, if you will, others in their minds and hearts to the deeper human values. I want to make sure to get that on the table. It's a very interesting and complex part of the discussion that I know in this conference, Paginam and I were just saying, this is only the beginning of our discussions, I hope, because we've raised so many issues here in this conference. So, okay, that's enough from me. I am not one of the panelists. I want to begin now with our distinguished colleagues. The first will be Dr. Farooq Tuncer. On the way over, Farooq and I are friends, and we've known each other for a few years. And on the way over here, driving, we were listening to traditional Turkish and Arabic music, and he was singing. And I told him, you know, you could sing your presentation, and it would probably really make an impact on people. So I will let him decide if he's going to sing his presentation rather than to read it. So without further delay, Dr. Farooq, please give us.
Thank you.